Romeo and Juliet into a uniquely American tale of love and the immigrant experience. Tonight, the music from this well-known stage production is reimagined for solo violin and orchestra, with Joshua Bell performing the roles of all the memorable characters from the Broadway show. Joining him on stage as Maria is acclaimed soprano Larissa Martinez. We hope you enjoy their fresh take on this American classic. Here's Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story Suite.
And we're live, streaming live to you from the footsteps of New York City. We are Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and we're delighted that you can join us for a unique podcast community where we explore the issues and challenges in the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished artists. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. And thank you so much to our community, new and people just joining us for the first time, and people who are regulars for Music Matters. We just reached our 1,000 subscriber mark, and it's thanks to you. We're delighted to be a part of that. This community continues to inspire people, both professional artists and the people who love that art, to come together and talk about how important music is. You can also see our past 109 episodes on our website at www.jasontram.net. And you can see we have tons of great upcoming guests, and we are delighted that you're here today. We have a wonderful guest today. We have Mr. Charles Zarnecki, who has started musical life in Buffalo, New York, and his art has taken him to the stages of Broadway as a conductor and music director, and projects all over the world. We are so delighted he's here today. Welcome, Charles.
Hello, hello. It's good to see you, Jason.
Now, I said you were from Buffalo and you've had a long association with New York City, but where are you now?
I'm in Berlin. I'm in Berlin, Germany.
Very nice. And you've been in Germany full-time, back and forth, of course, but full-time for a couple of years now, right?
Yeah. I've been in Berlin for 2 years, Leipzig before that, just for a year. So, it's going quite well. I still have my place in New York and my office, and my business is still sort of New York centric, but it was mostly remote before I moved. So it's and who knows, maybe I'll be back. But for now,
I'm sure you'll be back. I'm sure you'll be back and forth, and you straddle those two continents, because your art is just doing so incredible things on so many different levels, from classical to contemporary to Broadway to so many other things we're going to talk about today. And I'm just delighted that we can get you and we can squeeze you in, that you can squeeze us in your busy schedule.
No, I'm delighted too, and congratulations on 1,000 subscribers.
Got to start somewhere. It's been, this is our COVID pivot, and getting to do it with my family and my son Quentin has been a real blast. And, we just kept on, for me, originally, it was a chance to tell stories. And I was supposed to be making my debut in Prague and Vienna, conducting some orchestras. And I was so excited about that. Then everything ground to a halt. And then I had everything shuttered at once. And I said, what am I going to do? It was only, I cleaned my backyard up, did all my raking and leaves and all the stuff I'd neglected for the last decade of years. And then I came back and said, now what? I've cleaned up the backyard. I have nothing to conduct. So I said, I miss talking to my colleagues and my friends. And that's where we are today. It's amazing how incredibly creative the creative arts community has become during COVID.
Well, hey, by definition, I guess the creative community has to be creative. I'm just seeing how many times we can say creative in the same.
Well, I can't imagine a more creative person than you. Ever since I first met you, a few years ago.
How long has it been? Actually, I've been trying to figure that out.
Well, I started teaching at Seton Hall after we did it. I think 2 years after we did that project. So it's probably 2010, I would say, was the year we did that project together. The Brundabar, which is such an interesting opera, and you did an incredible arrangement of that score, really taking into consideration the historical, legacy of the piece and the importance of the piece, and I was so impressed. And of course, I knew that you were an assistant conductor on Jersey Boys and conducting on Broadway, but amazing stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. It was great to have you there too, and all of your resources and talents. And we put that ad hoc orchestra together, and I was in your pit too. That's right, because I wrote a book for accordion, piano, and something else. I think I was playing percussion too.
You wrote the book for yourself almost, and not every wonderful pianist I work with has accordion chops. So,
well, it definitely comes from my background, and if any of my family's watching now, I'm sure they'll be happy to hear that, and they're laughing delightfully about it.
I know that one is for sure, because Marnie Zarnecki just says hello, brother, on the chat. So.
Yeah, my sister's here. Hey, sis.
That's awesome. So let's go back in time. Did you always know you wanted to be an artist?
Oh, wow, that's going way back. So I don't remember this story, but the story goes, that's been told to me, is that somewhere around the time when I was 2 years old, my mother and I were on our way back from someplace, and I ran out of I think it was a caravan at the time, and ran into the house, and we had a piano in the house, and I started plunking something out. And by the time my mom got in, she saw that I was actually plunking out a melody, and it turned out it was what was on the radio when we got out of the car. So that was that's, once again, I have no memory of this, but this is what they tell me. And I think within a year of that, I started on Suzuki, yeah, so there was this thing, obviously that was inside me before I was even conscious of it. And that obviously sort of developed into all these different steps, from just being piano centric, at first, and then it expanding to, doing more. I mean, even growing up, I grew up in Polish American family. I was, dancing the polka, the oberek, the waltz. I mean, that kind of culture and that music was part of me. My father was a musician in a polka band, yeah, my mom was kind of a groupie in the polka band. That's how they met, so there were a lot of musicians around us. All my dad's friends and my mom's friends and stuff from that scene. So sort of this mix of music that was around me, different cultural influences. I think that actually feeds a lot into the the pride that I have, not just in my own culture, but the pride that I have in the cultures that I'm responsible for representing, and the historic periods that I feel I have to honor in a profound way. And I think it also feeds into one of the reasons why I decided not to have a concert career, and why it felt so much more natural for me to move. Well, not move. I was conducting and playing the piano at the same time from the time I played the piano all the way up. I first conducted when I was like 16. I started professionally conducting. So like, I had this like alter ego of doing a sort of, my degrees in classical music, but at the same time I was working in musical theater and conducting and starting to arrange and starting to music produce and things like that. So it was kind of like the first Clark Kent and Superman, not Superman. I don't know. Some more like Jekyll and Hyde.
Got to keep those hands moving up and down. Can the cueing bring them back in? Always wrangling those singers. That's a great skill set to do.
Yeah. So anyway, it's evolved, over the years, and as I sort of followed what people were asking of me. The first thing I ever orchestrated, someone asked me to do it because they thought I did it for a different project that I had done, which I had only music directed and music produced. And I was just like, yes, I can. And I was like, okay. So I orchestrate this whole thing, and I go to the first rehearsal, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And I'm like, and I'm like conducting, and I'm like, oh, it's not so bad. Okay. And it's just something that I was more like the I guess school of hard knocks of orchestration and music production, but then very, very formally educated in piano and theory and history and stuff like that. So
what was the first show you music directed that you said that you remember saying, okay, this is something I want to pursue at the next level?
Well, it was probably the first one I ever did, which was Godspell. I went to St. Joseph's Collegiate Institute in Buffalo, and somewhere around my sophomore year, they discovered that I could play the piano. I think I was actually playing percussion in like the band or something at that time, but they found I could play piano, so I ended up being involved with the musical and started playing rehearsals and whatnot. But I was also in the pit band. So then I was like the only link between the pit band and the rehearsals with the choral rehearsals and choreography rehearsals. And then when we put it all together, the music director, who was a trumpet player, was sort of starting to lead. But because I had been in both sides, they were like, well, why don't you just let Charlie, they called me Charlie. Why don't you just let Charlie do the thing? And I got my first and only conductor lesson ever. And it was my now good friend and long time mentor, Jim Diat, who was like, just when you cut off, just pretend you're touching like a hot plate or something, like a hot oven or something. I was like this, and everyone went, and I was like, okay, I guess that works.
Gotta show that ictus. Yep.
Yeah. And that was that was literally the beginning. Then they hired me that summer to start doing some professional theater because I caught on pretty quick, and the rest is history with that. Obviously, I continued in theater my entire life all the way till now. But all my formal education, like I said, was my undergrad was psychology and classical piano. My graduate school was classical piano performance. I studied in Russia in between there at St. Petersburg State Conservatory. So it was and all the whole festival thing, Sarasota, and all the New Paltz piano summer at New Paltz. And anyway, I was just really lucky to be able to live those two. I didn't sleep for 25 years, but it was nice living those lives before I started trying to focus. But as you know, it's not really that focused.
It's always a challenge, right? So what was it like? How did you make the transition? You came to New York. You did your master's degree. How did you get your first crack at the Broadway stage?
Well, somehow the Broadway thing kind of like swelled. when I started conservatory, I was also doing like children's theater. I went to Purchase, and I was doing children's theater in White Plains with like high-risk kids, and that was sort of partnered with a professional theater company that was giving it some personnel, and then they kind of discovered me, pulled me out of there, put me into some other things. Within a year, I made my equity theater debut at Westchester Broadway Theater, which I think is closed now.
That's so sad. I just saw they closed. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was and then that sort of led to some other things. So anyway, within a few years, I was working with a lot of Broadway people, but I had never worked on Broadway. So then I continued in grad school, and I was working really hard in the classical education world, which you sort of get sucked into because it's its own isolated utopian existence, when you're in conservatory. And but I managed this theater thing and made a lot of connections. And I don't know, at some point, one of those connections called another connection. I got called into an audition room to play for a well-known Broadway star, and somehow I impressed the music director in the room there. And within a month of that, I made my Broadway debut at Jersey Boys. So it was like, it's just being in the right place, the right time, but also, just always being at your best level, and you can have that opportunity, but if you're not firing on all thrusters when they're watching, it's that opportunity's gone without you even knowing it was there.
Yeah, it's such an important lesson. We have a lot of young people who listen to the show, students, music students, and things like that. You got to always be your best, always be prepared. And one thing you're leaving out of the equation is you're a fantastic colleague. People like you. You're a good person, and I think that's important too.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you for saying that. I mean, honestly, the relationships are the most important element of it, by far. When even from, after a long career and being in this situation of putting my own teams together now, from the perspective of either a music director, music supervisor, or even an executive producer, your basic, almost everything, you're looking for their creative qualities, but almost everything depends on how well the people that you are putting together will play well together in the sandbox. And you need to protect that I don't know why I sort of chose that analogy, but
it's a good one.
We protect that team. Just like if you're a music director, you need to protect your cast, or if you're a director, you need to protect your cast. But there's this certain, energy that needs to exist in order for the creativity to really blossom at its best. And on that level of sort of just personal relationships, I think that's it's so essential. It's the most essential thing is establishing new relationships, and not just making the friend, making the connection and being like, oh, I met so-and-so, or I worked with so-and-so. You need to nourish that relationship. You need to stay in touch with those people, and you need to follow up with them, not because you're looking for work all the time, but because you care, which leads to a lot of what I've been doing during COVID, actually, which is just following up, like mostly because people's lives have been destroyed.
Especially in the arts, right? Especially in the arts, disproportionately so.
Yeah, so it's, literally in the first few days of COVID, I started making a list of people, like either people that like I knew, maybe someone who just went through a divorce or something. I know they're alone and they just are not used to being alone, or someone who has been doing 8 shows a week on Broadway and suddenly Broadway closes, and I know that their personality, their disposition, is based on the constant validation of their talent in the form, because they just had been employed for 20 years. They don't know any other world. And yeah, you could say that might be ill-adjusted to reality, but that's their reality. And nobody thought that this would be our reality. So, there's 1,000 different reasons. But anyway, that list started at about 10 or 15 people, and it turned into over 100 people within the first 2 weeks. And that was one of my biggest goals. I think in the first 6 months, I managed to call one person at least every day, just to check in. And if they're really struggling, I'd be like, okay, let's write. What do you want to do? Let's write a song. You haven't written in a week, have you reached out to so-and-so that you did this project with? Maybe you should look, and just trying to get things going. And that, that's everything. You might not even realize it when you make that simple call. You may have saved someone's life.
That's a good point. It's so important that simple act of calling.
It's not an exaggeration at all,
Yeah. That simple act of calling and showing you care can make the difference in someone's life. That's really such a noble thing. And boy, you get to. That's what it's all about. That's what the arts are all about too. Is ultimately it's not just a way for us to make money on a vacation. It's our lives, and it's the people we work with that is just as important as the funding and the money.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is, like, I think that's an important thing to be talked about as well. Is like, not only the creative people have to keep on creating, but the money that comes into projects that makes them happen. The people that think, oh, the arts are dead, it's not time to like actively seek projects to help fund or to help produce or to help whatever, they are sorely misled by that. Now more than ever, do creative projects need to be developed. Obviously artists are adapting to continue without those resources. But we need those resources. This is not a sustainable situation, that if we get another wave and everything shuts down again, some people had already, gotten to the end of their resources after 1 week because they just had nothing to fall back on. But others are they kept their heads above water for this long, but doing it for another year, I don't know if that's quite possible. Most people that I know in the arts are talking about, well, I need to get this degree, or I need to get my real estate certificate, or I need to,
learn to code. Yeah, I've heard a lot of that.
Yeah, but it's still like, it can sustain itself, but the whole structure has to function. Even if the theaters aren't open, the whole structure has to function. Everyone has to help everyone out,
Isn't it incredible? I mean, we're seeing something that, I live right outside of New York City, so I look at Broadway and the Metropolitan Opera as kind of my barometer because I live right here. And I've had a lot of musicians from both from the pits and from the stage. And this is something we've never seen before in any of our lifetimes. In fact, in the history of Broadway and in the history of the Metropolitan Opera, we've never seen anything like this before. So we're in such uncharted territory here.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, I have the gift and curse of being an eternal optimist about certain things. But I feel like at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was like, oh, great, I'm home. I could do all this stuff that I've wanted to do forever, but I never do. I could read these books and I could blah, blah, blah. And, and that, I think for some people, it really works, that can motivate themselves and not get depressed that they're not doing what they really want to do, but maybe they're doing something else. But it's, I don't know. I think that there's an opportunistic, an optimistic, and a sort of there has to be an element of practicality to how you continue to fill your time. It should be rewarding you, yes, but I think that a lot of these projects have to eventually get goal oriented if they're going to help you to sustain yourself. And if we're talking specifically about artists, that's sort of, once I got through that list of 100 people, and I was very, very lucky at the beginning of the pandemic. Actually, the clip that you showed at the beginning is one of the gigs that I was working on as the pandemic happened. And because of all of the dates that were lined up with Josh and Larissa, a lot of the major festivals still wanted to broadcast remotely. So suddenly, some of the arrangements I was writing may have been for a small orchestra or something, but then they had to be sort of reimagined to just be in trio form or just be in duo form, which is actually how I started writing for them. I started writing like encores for them, for like unaccompanied like soprano and violin duets. And I still do that for them occasionally. You may have seen some of that, like their Christmas card and stuff like that.
I've seen a few of them. They're wonderful. And how did you first meet Joshua Bell and Larissa Martinez?
That was an extraordinary evening, actually. I have a dear friend, Talia, who was invited me to go to a party. And actually, Talia is the last person I did a podcast interview with. She has her thing called Tune In with Talia. She's a Juilliard grad singer, and she's a cantor at a major synagogue in Long Island. So anyway, she has her own thing, kind of similar to this, like talking to artists and creative things and whatnot. Anyway, we reminisced about this night, but she invited me, and she's friends with Larissa, and I think it was, oh my God, I think it may have been her birthday or maybe Josh's birthday. Whatever the case, Josh wasn't there, but it was at Josh's place, and we were all up on the roof, and there's a lot of musicians and whatever, but I mean, I didn't really know anyone else there. And then suddenly it started raining. We ended up inside, and there was a guy playing a guitar, and I've done a lot of Latin music, and he was playing I think a classic Puerto Rican tune that I had recognized. And I just kind of sat down and started playing the piano with him, and then suddenly someone was like, "Oh, I didn't know we had a pianist here." And then, as this happens, if a pianist is in a room, then all of the sopranos suddenly appear out of nowhere.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So anyway, somewhere along, I don't know, somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning, later that night, we were still playing like opera games where they would throw an aria in front of me, and I'd be like, okay, I'm playing. And then someone would sing, and then someone would clap, and then the next person would sing and pick up the aria on the next note, and someone would clap, and then the same thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like utopia, but like completely insane. But it ended up being this just fantastic evening of amazing musicians just kind of sharing. And somewhere at the end of that night, Larissa and I ended up talking, and she said that, she was kind of looking for an arranger at the time, and I started doing these really sort of special encores for her and Josh to use at special events, or as actual encores or whatever. And that sort of over, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, just doing odd errands, ended up turning into more elaborate projects. And the most elaborate of being this West Side Story thing, which is actually almost a posthumous collaboration, because a lot of the source material of that comes from what's his name, William David Braun's arrangement of the West Side Story suite, which was very famous, which Josh did an entire album of, and did the Central Park concert with New York Film and all that stuff. That we sort of took some sections of that and adapted it. So then I adapted it to add the soprano, and then we added additional songs that were very sort of featuring the soprano, and then sort of reworked it and reworked some of the cadenzas and transitions and whatnot, brought it down to less than 10 minutes. And now it's a really wonderful sort of piece that they can use in many different situations now. And I also did the trio version for them too, with piano, which they recorded for the PBS special, I think, as well. So,
what's it like seeing your music that you arranged for these 2 star performers hit the big time, get spread all over the country and the world? What does it feel like to you?
I mean, it's lovely. I mean, it's a dream to write for them because they're, most of the orchestrations and arrangements that I write, I've been fortunate enough to be in like the Broadway scene and work with some amazing musicians and even write super unconventional orchestrations like the Brundabar thing that you and I worked on. Like I knew all of the, I think I was doing some contracting for that too. So when you have in mind the actual player that you're writing for, then it becomes a different story. And you're like, I know, I can hear his sound, or I can hear the way that my violist is going to, like, I know the way she's going to read that. And
so we're dig into that that double stop, or yeah,
like you can see their bodies doing, like their bodies, their technique, So it's the same thing with Joss and Larissa, but like to the next level, because I can basically write anything, but it's also a challenge to find that balance, because you want the artist to still be able to take it to the next level on their own, in their own craft. You know what I mean? So you never want to, write, if you're writing for, I don't know, a belting soprano or something like that in a theater piece, like you never want to write their highest note. I mean, that's just, you want to give them, or if they're a singer that likes to improvise a lot, like you always want to leave some kind of space for them to put their own stamp on it in a way. Obviously with fuller orchestrations, you don't leave any room for interpretation. You want it to just work, because it's just going to be one rehearsal and you got to hit it. But with them, it's a little different, and it's a collaborative thing. Like Josh shares an arrangement credit with me and with Braun on that West Side Story thing, because he's very, very active in the way that it is, and obviously Larissa gives a lot of input as well. And I talked to her a lot about how it feels and how she can float certain notes, and it's a wonderful collaboration. Whereas most stock arrangements or orchestrations that I do, I have to make sure that if this is going to be part of a national tour and it goes through, the University of Northern South Dakota, or you know what I mean, and like, you have to make sure that like whoever looks at that part, it's playable. It still has to sound good, regardless of where you are or what musicians you have at your disposal. So
you're not always going to have Joshua Bell on that particular spot.
Yeah. It's not like I can outsource those arrangements to other performers very easily. It's not going to be a high school production of West Side Story. It's going to be a concert.
I love reading, like when you see the construction and the writing process of like Tchaikovsky's Concerti and Beethoven and Mozart. How much the same process. It's really the same process. They wrote it for a specific virtuoso, and the virtuoso usually has input in a lot of these cases.
Or sometimes is the actual dictator in the relationship, much like the operas, the Verdi operas, everything, basically everything that came out of Venice or everything that came out of Dresden, when it was the center, if there was a diva there, the composer was a piece of, was a second-rate citizen compared to the superstar diva. So all the buck stopped with the performer at that time. I actually wrote a paper, I think in grad school or no, it wasn't in grad school. By the time I got to grad school, I realized that was an important thing. But when I realized that was the case, I think my sophomore, junior year in college, I wrote some kind of paper being like, I think this is an absolute disgrace. This is the worst period in music history ever. How could they possibly dictate to the composer what the genius should be? I had this ideal,
very romantic ideal, right?
Yeah, very ideal, idea about it, and I really wanted to say it. And then, as I got older, I slowly learned, wow, I'm way off on this. This is actually an essential part of almost every period of music in history, So.
Well, I think when Beethoven came along, he was such a forceful personality, and still is to this day. That his first piece when he was 18, his cantata for the death of Emperor Joseph. That piece, even when he was 18, the players were like, "This is too hard. The wind parts are too difficult. The string parts are really challenging." Everyone complained, and they did that until the day he died. So he was an uncompromising figure, and eventually he couldn't hear them. And even when didn't work, he couldn't hear them. So I think a lot of people have adopted that romantic legend and said, this has to be this way. But there's always a balance with these things, especially when you've got great performers, and acknowledging what these great performers bring to the table is important.
Absolutely. It's relevant. I mean, there has to be a balance, but it's extremely relevant. It's extremely relevant. Yeah.
So Charles, your range of projects. So you started in this Broadway world, and your career is really developed in so many different ways. I see you've done a lot of film work. You've done a lot of every type of commercial work. How do you your innovation and your entrepreneurial spirit, how has that expanded since you started on Broadway, and you've experimented with so many different parts of the music industry?
Yeah, it's I think when I was younger, it was saying yes to everything, as we learn how to do when we really need work. But once it started getting to the point where I didn't necessarily have to say yes to everything, and I realized that certain credits that I was able to, it was really, really fortunate. I mean, obviously I worked very hard, but there's always luck involved, and there's always, like I said, being in the right place at the right time. Because I was able to make my Broadway debut so young, and it being in a show that won a Tony and all that stuff. And then that same year was my Carnegie Hall debut, and it was in Stern Auditorium, and it was orchestrating and conducting. So there were a couple credits that I realized I didn't have to do that credit again. It sounds like a kind of weird thing, but there were a couple things I was like, okay, I was able to produce some stuff, like music produce and arrange recordings for some, I don't know, like just some favorite, like working to a certain level in various areas of the industry. Once I had those sort of calling cards, then I realized that, okay, I don't need to just get calling cards to get calling cards. I was like, okay, I can use those calling cards to fuel my own legitimacy of collaborations with other people. And I realized that developing projects from the ground up was something that I really wanted to do. It was partially because in some situations I realized that you're hired as a for hire for like a music director or arranger or whatever, and you realize you're surrounded by people that maybe there's a couple of people that are really great, and then there's a few people that are just poison. And it's just like, okay, well, there's always that. It's never ideal. So I realized okay, if I can be part of creating these teams, putting great people together that love each other and that are trying to do things that make a difference, then I would much rather do that. And maybe even the credits that I had quite young can actually help legitimize a project that might not otherwise get any attention, or maybe it's just, well, whatever the case. I think it started getting into two very specific compartments, and one of them is like philanthropy, like projects that are really, really focused on some issue, on something that is very, very important. And my collaborations with Daniel, which is the way that you and I met as well. He directed the project that I guess I've been just addressing you, but I guess other people are looking too, so I should be like, Jason and I worked. I can talk in that way too. It seems abstract to me, but the project that Jason and I worked on together, the director of that was Daniel Knighton, and Daniel and a number of his collaborators have been a central part of that department of projects, including Wunderbar, which is very anti-bullying and obviously like, Holocaust awareness and all that stuff. But like these kinds of projects, whether it has to do with a disease or it has to do with, educating people about very specific things, or helping kids deal with like very difficult problems, helping parents deal with very difficult problems with their kids, there's endless of these kinds of projects that are incredibly rewarding, and that have turned into just beautiful projects. So there's that sort of compartment, and then the other compartment is like trying to reinvent the industry a little bit, always pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And in my opinion, what I really set out to do is sort of blur the lines between the industries, because I truly believe that the future of what theater and film and TV and sort of live performance, and even the tech industry, I think all of that is going to mesh into one, but nobody has really figured out how to do that. And there's a few projects that I'm working on now that have really started to put their finger on that. Actually, I know we don't have that much more time, but
well, we're not under the clock unless you have to go. We can stay and talk as long as you want.
All right, well, we'll go over a little. It's totally fine with me. I think it's important, but if maybe if you wanted to do the show one of the clips that we have, this 1 minute clip of Infinite Hotel Parallelogram, which it's the 59-second video cue.
It's all queued up, ready to go.
If we could show that, and then I can sort of talk about that. I think that I'll talk a little bit more about the philanthropy as well. But maybe we start with this sort of like reinventing genres kind of a thing.
Here we go. Quentin, cue up the video. So tell us about what we just saw, Charles. That was really beautiful.
Yeah, so that's why I would play the video first, because it's impossible to describe without showing it.
A video speaks 1,000 words, right?
Yeah. So anyway, that's a project that was sort of conceived by a brilliant director and writer. His name's Michael McQuilkin, and Michael had actually almost had an entire program invented for him at where was it? Yale, to basically develop this concept that was basically like a movie making machine. It was a live concert, immersive sort of concert experience that was filmed from beginning to end in one take. And so it involves a live audience that is immersed and being used as extras in the film. It involves a live audience that is sort of sitting on a catwalk above, that is on like silent disco headphones and is able to hear the actual like audio that's coming from all the live performers and all that stuff. And then you have literally a feature film being made from every performance, where there's nearly no pre or post production at all. It's all built into the live performance, including obviously the very intricate camera choreography and lighting and sound design and everything.
How long does a project like that take to conceptualize, and then to realize, then to produce?
Well, this is a sort of an interesting project, because what you saw there is actually a very, very short reel that I helped to put together. But I'm involved with this project purely as a producer and a developmental producer as well. I'm likely also going to be attached as a music supervisor going forward. But that project has now secured a new Hollywood writer that has come on, and a huge Hollywood star, neither of which I can talk to you about right now, but will be announced very shortly.
Exciting.
It's now has a new title. You saw sort of like what defines the technique of making it, which is sort of invented by Michael. It's called a oneer. Which is this idea of this film, this one-take film that is part of an immersive theatrical indie rock concert experience. But he did the production at Yale. I hope it's Yale. And then a production in Philadelphia, which then developed to a whole new level, and then a production in Brooklyn, which is what you just saw there, which went to a whole other level. And now this is one of my passion projects over COVID, is that the new writer in LA and Michael in New York and me in Berlin, we've had a weekly meeting for every week for the entire length of COVID until 3 weeks ago, when the new writer started the new script. And that collaboration led to an incredible outline design that sort of brought the concept to another level, started really refining all of the paths of the characters. It follows characters that are very much alive and interacting with each other, but there are also characters there who are unconscious. And there's one that's in a coma, there's one that's not alive. There's and it talks about a very fluid concept of time and how we're all connected, and I truly think that the experience and the story and everything really sort of answers this question, this sort of desperate need for an entire generation searching for like something intimate and something that connects people, but using technology. You know, everyone's like, oh, I'm connecting with people on my phone, and like, but nobody can see past their phone now. So, you know, there's something with technology that people are just on the cusp of trying to discover that could actually really connect us. And I think that this project is gonna do that, you know, come through in space.
Starting to bridge that gap. Yeah, there's like, we're all on Zoom all day. Like, and I'm teaching college right now, and I do a lot of that. And I teach my orchestra, my 2 choirs. I have 2 choral societies. Everything's through Zoom, and you know, we're keeping communities together. But I think there's more. I think like people like yourself are exploring that deeper connection that can exist and can write the script on that. That's really exciting. Yeah.
So it's been a real honor to be the facilitator in that process. So we're, because of COVID sort of still being quite prominent in all of our lives, it's possible that, you know, for instance, if we do a production of that in the next year, it might be, you know, especially if we continue with the precautions and everything, it might involve an audience that's actually quarantined for 2 weeks before, and the actual audience and the production team are completely quarantined, for us to fully realize that in the way that it should be realized, but not in the way that it could ideally be realized, the way that it's really designed to be, which is, you know, people coming every day to a production, and then, you know, a chosen cut turns into the feature film that you'll then see on Netflix or in the theater or whatever. So
can't wait for that to come to life. And I think we all need that type of art. And And there's only so much traditional Netflix I can, and I like my series as much as anyone else. And I go through a binge a series, but then, well, you're talking about something new, and I think that innovation, that eye to innovation, that's always a big theme of this show is COVID and self-discoveries made during COVID and artistic innovations. And I think you're at the cutting edge of this.
I hope so. I mean, it's been a long time coming too. It's been I've been involved with a number of different projects. If you check out my SoundCloud, there's another project called Get Got that's fantastic, and it's been something that I've been involved with for almost 10 years. And we started pitching it as like sort of a mini-series concept, and but we were at like Edinburgh Festival and did production of it live, and that has been pretty much non-active for a while. But I also see that project as something that, like, now that this project that you just saw, the Infinite Hotel, or Parallelogram it's actually called now, I think that project is actually gonna pave the way for more immersive, high concept, interactive live performance. And especially since they both utilize so much technology and so many concepts that sort of help people to, in both a pleasant and also a sobering way, see the reflection of the actual society that they live on and the consequences of that, the consequences of technology being used in the wrong way, instead of the way that brings us together, just this sort of profit-based economy and constant neglect for the well-being of the people using it, as opposed to the optimization of humanity and relationships and everything, which
just look at social media, and it could either be a gun, or it could be an incredible tool to actually draw us together. It's the choice of each of us, and how we want to make this work, and what we can use these platforms for.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just to sort of go on change the axis a little bit from that, and to stay on the subject a little bit of COVID and sort of COVID projects that came out of COVID, well, not necessarily out of COVID, but out of, like, during the period, and how they're actually possible. That last one is more about, like, how you can develop something, you can continue to go forward. And that's sort of the subject that led me to saying maybe we should talk about that one, is that, we need to, it's not just reading books, and it's not just like passive creativity at home, but, if we really want to survive this, we have to, well, we don't have to, but I would say that it would be very ideal for the project that you're working on to have some kind of purpose that's beyond just you, first of all, and second of all, something that is relevant to the times and can also survive post-COVID. It seems like that term doesn't even exist yet, and it's something that we're hoping to, like, talk about. But post-COVID is something that is actually the motivation for a lot of the pitches that I do now with projects. We're not going to have time to get into all of them, but literally one of the catchphrases of one of the pitches that I do is the ideal post-COVID cruise ship casino production. And that's like that's a whole other thing. It's about Genesis and Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel. It's a whole other thing, which is super, super exciting, and I want to tell you all about it. But we do have a clip from a project that was conceived during COVID and fully realized during COVID, and has actually been a great thing that has helped the Broadway community a bit, has helped the awareness of the Black Lives Matter movement, and has even been featured in film festivals during COVID as well. So maybe we could show that one, and I could sort of riff on that, and I think that would be a good.
Fantastic. Gives you so many. You have such a broad base of projects and styles, and fantastic. Quentin, cue up the next video. We're just getting it set up. I think we're ready to go. What year was this?
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. One victory is won. March on. Victory. March on to victory.
Honoring those who died, we march to save black lives, striving to survive. We stand with pride, vowing to be our best. Together we are blessed, proving that love shall conquer all the rest.
We shall stand against hate and every oppression. We shall stand, standing for change and healing our nation.
Marching for liberty, demanding equality. We shall march on till victory is won. Victory. Victory is won.
March on, march on,
Rising sun.
march on
Victory.
to victory, to victory.
Facing the rising sun. Victory. Victory.
March on
We get to know what else to do. Rising sun.
to victory, march to victory.
Oh, victory.
Facing the rising sun.
March on.
Financial support for the movement can be made by donating to any of these organizations.
Well, that's a powerful project, Charles. Thank you so much for sharing that with our audience today.
Of course, of course. Yeah, so that was it was wonderful the way that it happened. It obviously sort of when everything happened with George Floyd and there was a resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, was a producer friend of one of our projects. The project is actually, this is the backstory of that group of people who collaborated there is actually in a project called Pearl, which is about the life of Pearl Bailey. And in that show, which I've been developing with C.B. Murray, Ben Harney, and for 7 years now, we've had a number of off-Broadway productions and different workshops and festivals and whatnot. And if it's not closed down, we'll probably be doing a production. It's possible this year. I don't know if it'll happen, but
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. It would be at City College, another off-Broadway production in New York, and also likely this depends on if the festival happens and if the conditions are the same, but maybe at the National Black Theater Festival in Winston-Salem.
Wow.
So anyway, if COVID depending, that might happen. But anyway, this project Pearl is basically this is the cast or a piece of the cast from Pearl. So in the video you see Jenny Harney, you see DeWitt Fleming. Well, actually, Jenny and DeWitt met on the Pearl project. Now they're married and they have a baby. So actually, Jenny Harney is now Jenny Harney Fleming, and DeWitt Fleming, who is the guy, the hoofer, doing the tapping. He plays Bill Bailey. He actually plays Pearl's brother, Bill Bailey, the famous tap dancer, the inventor of the moonwalk and whatnot. And then Keisha Lewis, who sort of plays like the mother of Pearl, but also like older Pearl. It's a interesting character that's been the last character to develop. Keisha's the first one you see in the video that's singing. But the way that this sort of started is that I think it was Teresa Collins, who's a producer friend of CB. CB Murray is the writer of the show, and he's also Pearl Bailey's nephew. And CB is part of the whole Dreamgirls family, the original Dreamgirls production, who he was in with Ben Harney, who won the Tony for Dreamgirls, and Ben is our director. And Ben's daughter is Jenny Harney, who is in Hamilton, and she's an incredible performer, and now she and DeWitt, her now husband, are stars in the show as well. So anyway, it's a big happy family, and we've done many projects before this as well. But anyway, Teresa Collins calls CB and says, after George Floyd happened, there's something here that has to do with Pearl. I don't know what it is. And CB ended up thinking of Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is, I don't know if you know the history of.
Of course, and that's incredibly appropriate for right now.
Yeah, so
with its civil rights, of course, resonance and the zeitgeist returning. Sure. Right,
and for the the watchers that don't know much about it, it started off as a poem by James Weldon. No, James Weldon. Weldon is his middle name. James Weldon Johnson. 120 years ago, I think in 1900. And then that was set to music by his brother, who is J. Rosamond Johnson. And that was 1905. And then the first performance of that, I think was on Abraham Lincoln's 35th death anniversary or something like that. But anyway, shortly after that, in 1920 or something, or 1919, I think, the NAACP was the first people to sort of dub it the Black National Anthem. So it became this sort of anthem that was, both a hymn and was sacred, but it was also a significant hymn specifically for the Black community. so anyway, CB was inspired and wanted to write a new verse to it that was relevant to now. And that's what you hear Jenny sing. So Keisha sings the traditional first verse, and then when the key changes, it goes into, honoring those who died. We honor, what is it? We long to save Black lives or something. And so it just starts being very, very reminiscent of the movement. So anyway, CB called me and he's like, this is the new lyrics. Do you think it'll scan? Because we were using that song already in Pearl. So now it's developed to a whole other level within the show, even though we didn't do this for the show, we did it for the movement. But obviously I was in Berlin and they're all in New York, and all the vocals that you hear, there are a couple professional mics in there, but most of the vocals that you hear were done on iPhones and sent to me.
Wow.
And
How incredibly timely. Like, that's the way that things are being done. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I just programmed all the instruments, everything, the B3 and the drums and bass and everything like that. That's me doing all like sample programming. And then all the vocals are a mix of the cast that you see, plus amazing singer Starla Brown, who was a member of this same production family. Thaddeus McCants, who plays one of the characters in Pearl as well. He did some backup vocals for us, including CB, and then Ben Harney did the voiceover at the end of it. But somehow we had a friend that had a church in Jersey City, and we were able to get people isolated. And because Jenny and DeWitt were married, they were able to interact, because they lived together already. But other than that, it was a completely social distanced shoot, including drone operator, director of photography, director, everything like that. And we just made it happen in a very, very short amount of time. I think less than 2 weeks, with only one shoot day, and me finalizing the audio of it before they did the shoot, so they could lip sync to the video sort of accurately, and we could sync up easier in post.
And what has the response been from the community, from people all over the country? What have you heard?
People love it, and it like I said, it was so relevant at that time that it started getting attention in a number of different film festivals. Some of those film festivals started getting interested then even further into the Pearl Project, which then CB turned into a film script, which then also won an award in a film festival as well, a script competition film festival thing. So anyway, it's proof that these things can happen, but you need to put people together that are willing to do the work. They're willing to do the work, and they're willing to sort of see that this is bigger than me. And, this isn't the time to be like, okay, well, are we all getting paid? Yeah, we all need to survive, but we also all need to generate something that continues to feed into what's relevant, what's important. But if you're not investing in, whether you believe in it or not, karma, that good nature is not going to come back to you in the industry unless you're putting it out too. So anyway, that's sort of a good example of a combination of something that's relevant, something that's sort of like borderline philanthropic, and then something that's also like done within the context of our extraordinary circumstances in the world.
We've covered such an enormous, from the classical to the Broadway to the more contemporary. We've covered such an enormous gamut that just scratches the surface of your work. How can people find out more about you, and how can they interact with you in any way? Which we always give people that option.
I guess the best way is I actually have a new a website that's going to go live like within a week or two. So I've had the same website for a long time, but now it's going to be expanding to not just .com but also .de for my German side clients, European sort of based business. My SoundCloud is a really great place to get an idea of the spectrum of projects that I've worked on. I'd say the majority of projects that I've done just in number have been as a music producer, arranger, producer, kind of orchestrator in that sense. So, but also a lot of the projects that I'm involved with as an executive producer, or just as an arranger, orchestrator, or just as a pianist, or whatever. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's featured on my SoundCloud. Maybe we can put that underneath.
Great. We'll put that in the details of the video. We'll definitely put it there so people can check that out, because people always like to dig deeper with the guests, and I think that's exciting. And you have so much to dig into. We can go for another 6 hours, but you and I are going to do this again soon.
No, but I think it's good. I think that's a good note to wrap up on. And you know, it's just you know, if I could send a message to everyone, you know, it's just be, you know, hang in there, keep on creating. I mean, if you're in a bad place, call someone, because likely the person you call might need you as much as you need them. And this sort of like collective solidarity is not just for artists, but this is for us to continue a civil and progressive and creative existence. So, and obviously, you know, you guys can find me on my Instagram, which is CZ Maestro, or Facebook. I'm under my own name. So if there's anyone that needs to understand more about resources or you know, how to get these kinds of things started, or if you have questions about the project, if you want to invest in projects, or if you're wondering how to do that, even if it's not my projects, like all these kinds of things they're just as important as the creative people that are contributing. So, you know, however I can facilitate, please reach out to me or reach out to Jason. He'll connect you. I just want to send positivity and love and creativity to everyone watching. So, and I'm so gracious for you to ask me to be here, man. I'm thrilled to be 110 and episode 110, and hopefully your 1,000 turns to 10,000 very, very soon. So.
Well, continued success in all of your creative endeavors. Such a creative artist and at the forefront of digital technology, and I think one of the artists who's going to be shaping the musical world in the decades to come. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. We want to urge you to subscribe to us on YouTube and smack that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Our next show will be this evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have independent singer-songwriter Anna May is going to join us. She just released her third album. We're delighted she'll be here with us today. Thank you so much, and remember, keep music alive.
Hello, my friends. I'm Larissa Martinez.
And I'm Joshua Bell.
I have great memories of singing for you all at the Lyric Chamber Music Society. We're here in our house in New York in isolation like everyone else.
But we're making great use of our time by, of course, making music. And also, we're working on new arrangements for soprano and violin. We actually have a new one for you of one of our favorite songs.
It's by composer Manuel Ponce, and it's called Estrellita.
Can we do it?